If I could give you a gift, the most precious thing I could ever give you is the knowledge of how to ignore your thoughts.
In this series, His Grace Bishop Emilianos of Meloa shares invaluable lessons on the practice of Nepsis, as he himself was taught by Elder Aimilianos of Simonopetra. Translated as watchfulness or vigilance, Nepsis refers to a state of spiritual alertness and attentiveness to one's thoughts, actions, and inner disposition. It involves being vigilant and watchful over the movements of the mind and heart, guiding against harmful thoughts, temptations, and distractions. Adapting the method of vigilance used by monastics, His Grace invites everyday people living in the world to learn how to cultivate Nepsis, align their will with God's will, and commune with the Holy Spirit. Our current and future life, everything on earth and in heaven, begins with this first lesson: how to deal with our thoughts.
Στο όνομα του Πατρός και του Υιού και του Αγίου Πνεύματος, αμήν. Δόξα τω Θεώ, ελπίσιμο δόξα. Βασιλεύ ουράνιο, παράκλητο πνεύμα της αληθείας, πανταχού παρών και τα πάντα πληρών. Θησαυρός των αγαθών και ζωής, χορηγός ελθέ και σκήνωσον ημί και καθάρισον εμάς από πάσης και είδος και σώσον αγαθέτω ψυχάς ημών. Through the praise of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. Do I need a microphone? Okay. All right. Put some extra chairs on the front because there is space, so everybody fits in. Otherwise, from outside, you won't be able to hear. Okay, so, can you hear me? Can you hear me? At the back they can't really. Is this better? That's
better.
That's too much.
That's good. That's good.
It's good?
Yes.
Alright, it's good. I don't like hearing my voice.
Well, we like to hear your voice.
Makes one of us. Alright. So this is the last Nepsis talk for this season. God knows what happens after. And I was thinking, how about if we were to not to go through the book, because we'll never finish this book in this life, but how about if we were to maybe say a thing or two of what was important that we learned through Nepsis, and then we can go through some questions that I've got, plenty of questions, and if you have any questions, whoever is here, happy to answer. So, if there was something that personally you think that helped you through was it 36 so far? 36, that's the 37th. So from the 36 hours of hearing my annoying voice, what would you say it's something that could be helpful? Because what helps every one of us could be helpful for someone else as well. So it's like a reality check. Did we get anything out of all these hours? Do you think that it was something that it was worth talking about? Anyone? Ένας, μην βιάζεστε. All right.
I would say just
Is this loud enough? Pater Christo, γιατί I can't hear them now. Wait a minute, so we can go through. We have our technician here. He just got a degree in switching on things. Yeah. A very well deserved degree. All right. Okay, let's see if this works now. If it doesn't, no. All right, start screaming and we'll see where we end up.
I would say just the state of being aware to be aware and using the Jesus prayer to pull yourself out of anything or even prevent yourself into falling into anything.
We're talking about Nepsis.
I know, and it works.
Oh, okay.
Just being aware.
Okay.
Yeah. Being aware to use Nepsis would be
Okay.
the best thing I've learned.
All right. Well done, you learned something. Anyone else?
Blessings here, Linda.
My blessing, but you have to be louder because...
Okay, I just wanted to confess
Sorry.
that for most of the 36 hours I didn't realise that Nepsis applied to our life in general. I was seriously thinking it was a technique we use when we sit down to do the Jesus prayer. And we would try that, of course. But it hit me like a rock only a number of weeks back that really it's something we need to be, as Michael said, conscious of our thoughts and where our soul leans towards the whole time, not just when we're praying, especially when we're praying, but not just. And that's opened up a whole world of, a different understanding, basically. Recently I read the book by Elder Thaddeus of Vidovnica, who talks about our thoughts determine our lives, and that just brought it home even more. And he mentioned also that even our thoughts, which aren't communicated directly about a person to that person, can have an effect on that person, and that just blew my mind as well. So thank you very much for these talks.
That's right. We might need to change the batteries.
Ask for some, but it's on, that's why it's...
Okay. Yes. So yes, Nepsis, it has to be exercised when we try to pray. Otherwise, the distractions are way too many. And we start from the Jesus prayer and we can end up being Buddhist, but yeah. But it also applies in our everyday life, because we all have thoughts from time to time, and we all have problems from time to time, and if we let them rule over us, they can destroy our peace. But this is, like Nepsis, is a training of how to walk on the waves in life. It's not just during prayer. And this is why we started these talks, because our lives today are so troubled that it's like we are asked to walk on the waves every day. And if we focus on the waves, if we focus on the temptations, if we focus on what's easy to do, we will end up losing ourselves. And it's not just us. We will end up making a difference around us in a negative way if ourselves we don't do the right thing. So our example matters for our family, for our friends, for everyone around us, but our inner peace also matters, and this is what Nepsis can help us with. Thank you for this point. Anyone else, anything?
I struggled at the beginning because I think my personality is very all or nothing. So the idea that you shouldn't be listening to your thoughts to go from 0 to 100, to try not to listen to us at all, ever, it seemed very overwhelming. And also, I guess I had my history and baggage that made me scared that, like, if you don't listen to your thoughts, you're vulnerable then for predators to, like, influence you badly. But I started learning that, like, maybe you can't do 100%, but you can just do a little bit, and a little bit of Nepsis makes a big difference. And if you can just dedicate some time, like not trusting the thoughts that come, but offering it to God, that can make a big difference. And so if you trust yourself so much that you don't want to block your thoughts, it comes from pride that you think you know the best, and then if you think you know the best, then you can't learn anything. And there's so much to learn, so it's exciting to go on that journey. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Sometimes anxiety makes us think like 100 miles an hour, only because if we don't think that we're in charge of the situation, we think that we lose the ground under our feet. That's what anxiety does with us. But if we understand that we're in God's hands, then we are less anxious, and usually the solutions comes when we are peaceful, not when we are pushing ourselves to find a solution. Can come there as well, but if we're not peaceful, we will be influenced in such a negative way that it won't be the best way out. Yeah.
Can I add something else I found helpful? I'm not sure if you agree, but maybe in my mind I think is a difference between thoughts and thinking. And like thinking, we need to think for God's given us a brain to think, but thoughts are like something else in a way. They're not the same thing. And when I made that distinguish between them, I found that helpful. Yeah.
So you're saying the difference between reasoning and logismus.
Yeah.
So the attacks, which are thoughts, not the thinking process. Yes, and there is a difference.
Another analogy I thought of was that like thoughts, in a way, they're like bullies. They're. And so why are we trusting the bullies in our life?
There are plenty of bullies in our lives, and we can't trust them. We can't pay attention to them because then, well, that's right. Yeah, they can be like this. Anyone else?
You're blessing you guys. Can you hear me? Or?
No, but this goes through to the live stream,
Okay.
at least.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think, in my opinion, I think it was a difficult journey for me because it actually puts a light on a lot of things: how prideful I am, how selfish I am, how unforgiving I am. And when I continue to listen to what you say, and it was difficult to try to fight all of this because for me, in my background, it is like my way or the highway, and that's it. But that was, and you continue to teach me how to be a real Orthodox Christian, basically. So thank you.
Thank you, Maxime.
Sorry, I'll speak. Is this enough? Can you hear? Okay. I think it definitely came for me personally at the right time because I was going through a lot of difficulties and problems, but there was a specific external sort of problem that it really helped me with, because at the start when you were talking about closing doors, I think I mentioned to you once as well, but I literally had to close the windows and the doors, and that helped to teach me actually how to practice Nepsis as well. And it also gave, like, if ignoring all the thoughts that come into your head, gave the space to see how self-centered we are, and also to allow more love for the other person, whereas before it wouldn't even fit in, if that makes sense, and to understand other people better.
Yes, that's a very important lesson for all of us. And when we talk about closing doors, we have to apply this in the following way as well. Like, we think, we pray, we understand that decision is right, then we have to be in charge of our emotions. We can't allow our emotions overrule us and enter into the house of our soul and mess up with what we know that is the right thing to do. And this could be, I said this example like in one of the first times when we talked about Nepsis. There was this couple that had the same spiritual father, because the best thing for a couple is to have the same spiritual father. And they came across a problem. And the problem was that the father, when the son, they had lots of kids, but when the son was doing something wrong, the father would tell him off. The mother knew that the son was wrong, but he couldn't handle it. And this would start a fight between the father and the mother. And the solution was found by the spiritual father. The spiritual father told them, look, you know that your husband is right. When he tells off your son, you go to the kitchen. And that's how the family didn't end up in a divorce. Because the mother couldn't handle the father discipline this thing, the son. Yeah. So once we know that something is right, the father was doing it, but the mother, her emotions wouldn't let her do it. So we need to be in charge of our emotions. That's extremely important. So we need to, once we know that we are safe, we lock our emotions out. And this is what Christ did. Imagine if Christ was emotional to the point that he saw his mother crying when he was on the cross, and she was under the cross, and he would think as human, oh, my mom cries, I will go down and keep her company. We wouldn't have the chance to be saved. We need to be in charge of our emotions. That's very, very important, and it has to do everything with Nepsis, because our emotions, they can mess us up. They can help us at times, but we need to be in charge of them. Anyone else? Just a minute, we need to get the microphone. Went for a walk.
She said Nepsis can help us get in charge of our emotions. Is there other ways, like, this is something I was thinking of recently. I was in the GP clinic observing as a student, and I saw a very sad situation. I started crying. I think this is inappropriate for patients. They can't have their doctors cry. How do you build up
the strength? This is an issue. When someone is sensitive, it takes a lot of training, but it's a matter of training. So you need to logically understand what you're doing. So the process that we said before, to be in charge of your emotions, it's something that your soul understands, but you need to explain this to your logic as well, which means you need to sit down with yourself and explain to yourself and convince yourself that this is the right thing to do, why and how you will do it. And once you convince yourself logically, then when your logic kicks in, then you have to practice it. By saying that I will lock out my emotions, it doesn't mean that I can do it straight away. It takes training. So you need practice. But if you were to practice, eventually it happens. So you will see that, for example, people that they are judges. They could have been more sensitive in their previous life before becoming judges, but the reality of things made them a little bit thick-skinned, and being able to isolate their emotions make them to see things clearer. They need to do that. As a doctor, you also need to do that, because if someone breaks a leg and you can't handle the blood, how are you going to help the patient? It's a matter of training, but I don't know if the doctors have any advice on that. No?
It takes a really long time to become true. It takes a long time to shut your emotions in when you're dealing with patients and you're purely clinical. And then your family complains that you don't have the emotion for them because you're always clinical. And
you're always thinking.
And you're always thinking. But we're absolutely useless to patients if we're anything but clinical. Because they need the emotion out of us to make the right decisions, to guide them. And then when they leave, we have to cry.
But this shows that we're using everything that God has given us for the benefit of others. If we were to allow our emotions to flood the room, we will be a mess. We won't help anyone.
And shutting off the emotion is different to being like disconnected to yourself.
Yes, you're not disconnected. You're just in charge of your emotions. And it's interesting, but Hierodes Emilianos, you would never see him crying during a service. Never. And he was saying that if the first in charge becomes emotional like this, he creates a mess around him. So he was always controlling his emotions. And this doesn't mean that he didn't have enough experiences during the Divine Liturgy to start crying. He did. But he was in charge of his emotions. And it takes a lot of courage to do this, and a lot of practice. And it doesn't stop you from being human. You can cry after. It just teaches you how you should be to be able to help others. You can't go and operate and have a hand that shakes. You will kill the guy. You can't do that. Anything else?
Just going on from emotions. Controlling emotions does not mean we do not care.
Yeah.
Right? Controlling emotions often is the best way to show that we care.
Yes.
Because people need to offload. And it doesn't mean necessarily in a doctor relationship, it means even outside. Like if a friend's got a problem and they want a person to hear, then they need that person to be able to listen and not respond fully with emotions, because then there's two people that are weeping. Whereas one of the two needs to be able to soak up the emotion that the other one's pouring out, but then let it go as soon as that person doesn't need them to carry it for a bit of time. And Angela.
All right.
So I guess what you're referring to is the holding space. And so in order to be able to hold someone else, we have to learn first how to hold ourselves. And there's lots of different various means of doing that. But it's also having that, I guess with Nepsis as well, that deeper reflection to know the things that you're struggling with and the things that will trigger you.
Can you tell us some techniques? Finish what you were going to say, and then if you have anything in mind, something practical we can all use.
Sure. So I guess depending if you're going to be triggered, usually it's very hard, depending on how badly you're triggered, your emotions will take over. And so many people go, I know the techniques, but I just don't know how to do them. Yes. And so usually in that sort of state, I would say somatic therapy is the best.
Which is?
Which is body-based therapy. So it doesn't require any rational thought. There's different ways of breathing. So there's one technique called box breathing, where you hold in your breath for 4 seconds, then you hold it for 4 seconds, and when you release, that's the most important part, is 6 seconds out or longer. And it actually regulates your nervous system, and once that happens, you'll be able to think logically. But if you don't do those, there's lots of different ways that you can do it. So whether it's grounding. So your feet, depending on where you are, you might go where the grass or the beach is and sand. So you're putting your feet into nature. Will actually help regulate your system. It could be sounds. So you have your earbuds. There's the latest technology, if you're very modern. It's 8D. It's called. So it's surround sound. So it's like you're submerged either into water or in the rainforest. So it takes you there. You can close your eyes, and it actually helps regulate your breath and your body. So when you do different somatic therapy techniques and your body's regulated, then you're more equipped to be able to ignore your thoughts or push them aside. But when we take that thought on as our identity or part of us, it's very hard to break from that. But if we realize the thought is just a thought and it's separate from us, and sometimes it can be from the enemy, sometimes it can be just something that happens. Our body doesn't have to be, I guess, garbage dump, where everything that comes just sits in there. There's techniques of when the thought comes, we get rid of it. And if you're doing that constantly, you won't feel like your body's going to be burdened or that heaviness is going to be there, so you'll be able to hold people. But if you're constantly holding so much, you won't have the capacity to hold someone else. You will be triggered.
So that's for us to use, and that's for us to use if we need to help others as well. Yes. People that they're outside, tell them there are chairs inside, they can come inside. Yes, thank you. Did you want to say something else? Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Any thoughts?
Personally, it was just for me to understand and learn not to despair, not to give up. So focusing on the prayer and understanding if the focus and the will is there, little tiny steps are better than taking no steps at all.
I usually say two things. They reminded me a few days ago. I say it is what it is, and I also say don't worry, we will all die. So, yeah. So it helps you regulate your priorities. George?
I still feel hopeless and like I've...
That's good. Taught you a lot.
I feel like I've got somewhere, so if we could do another 36 hours, that would be appreciated. I feel as though there's so many rules, if you will, that when listening to the talks you could be quite confused. But because I've restarted listening to them, and if you listen to them with a little bit of Nepsis, it's a little bit clearer the second time. There's less thinking. It just makes a little bit more sense. If I'm in an event and I've been busy for 3 hours, I can't wait to get in my car and not have music on. That never happened before. Listening to them, my day was just sound from start to finish. So I've noticed very slightly little changes, which is a building block, I think.
There are huge changes. You just can't see them, because when you grow every day a tiny bit, you can't tell. But then when you have a photo of yourself 2 years ago and a photo now, you can see the difference.
I understand. Thank you, everyone.
That's right. But when we hear about rules and this and that, don't get confused. If you just focus on God, everything else comes around. Everything else. Anyone else? Or even any questions about everything we've spoken about so far? Okay.
I was speaking to my god brother, who you were speaking to, and he said that you said something interesting that you haven't discussed with us as a group, and that was, he said, how come sometimes when we're upset, the body's shaking, the heart's shaking, and we're trying to do Nipsi whilst that's happening? And I think he said something to him like, if you're walking and there's a brown snake in front of you, and then it goes off into the bushes, and you keep walking, the heart's still going to be racing. Could you talk to us a little bit about how we continue to do Nipsi when we've just seen a snake, or we've just nearly been in a car accident, or we've just had a huge fight with someone that we care about? Because that's very hard.
I will tell you what I did when I got bitten by a brown snake, because I did.
Got bitten by a brown snake?
Yes. So I was working at the monastery in Perth, and Father Prodromos, Father Makarios now, he was on the tractor. I was walking through the grass, it was high grass. I crossed a small bridge, I turned back, I felt something on my Achilles tendon, this is how it's called, tiny little thingy. But I saw a snake living, and I realized that I got bitten. It went through the sock, under the trousers, I was wearing them black things, everything, under everything. And I said, Pater Makaria got bitten by a snake. So he called the ambulance, which happened to be close. And in the ambulance there were 2 women. And they laid me down on the grass. Lucky the snake didn't come back. Anyway, so they laid me down on the grass. Father Makarios gave them his belt. They put the belt around my foot. And then they tried to carry me, and that was funny. Because there were 2 women and they couldn't do it. Father Makarios said, can I please help? No, you're not allowed. All right, so basically they dragged me into the ambulance. I went to the hospital, and for 10 hours they were trying to find out what snake it was. So they took some blood a few times. They were confused as if they were confused. They didn't know what snake it was. So they ended up giving me double antivenom for 2 different types, whatever, of snakes, whatever it was. And this was my story with the snake. I didn't have time to panic. Like, I saw the snake living, I knew I got bitten. But there was another occasion, because there are a few snakes in the monastery, and how the reflex works. It was again me and Father Makarios. And we saw the snake. He was in front of me, and I got so scared that I pushed him towards the snake. And that was so funny, but he freaked out. Anyway, yes. So when we're in danger, we can react in all sort of different ways. There is no time for practicing Nipsi then. And that's why they say that, you know, this technique, I don't remember the name, for the ladies that they want to give birth without pain, there is a technique, how is it called? I don't know how it's called. And you need to practice some specific moves. Yes. So when you are about to give birth, it's easier. So there were 2 women. The one was very smart, and she learned everything, and then she didn't practice. But the other one was a little bit more practical, and she thought, I will keep practicing although I know. When the time came, the smart one who knew the technique panicked and couldn't put it in practice. The other one who made it a second nature put it in practice. So this is what we need. We need to practice what we learn, not just learn it theoretically. It doesn't help just knowing the technique of Nipsi if you haven't practiced it. And then, when you have practiced it and you come in front of a big temptation, let's say that I go through a huge difficulty in life, I know that I should practice Nipsi. My mind still escapes, goes to the problem. I know that I should practice Nipsi, I get my mind back. I get my nose back, I can do it easier. Nevertheless, we need to be aware that if we just had a panic attack, which is from being in front of a snake and being worried that we will die, our body has to naturally calm down. And we can do this with the techniques that Angelina told us before, with the breathing, grounding and everything else. And we can also do this after calming down our body a little bit with prayer. Because when you're in a panic mode, you can't really pray. You're in a panic mode. Nothing makes sense. I don't know if this responds to your question. Yeah. Does anybody want to add anything to this?
I just know from my experience that if I get triggered, and thankfully it doesn't happen as much as it used to, something I learned from Presbyter Michelle is just accepting that, like, your body is doing its thing and there's nothing you can do about it. You just got to ride the wave. And then, like, because almost like there's almost like a pride there where you're like, I should be better than this, I shouldn't be affected by this, and the pride like makes you panic more. But if you just accept this is it, it is what it is, then it's not so bad, and I find that helps a lot.
This accepting, you could also interpret it like when we're in trouble, we are way more than before in God's hands. And there is this story with the two set of prints on the sand. So there was this guy, and he was wondering, I think he had a vision, and it's a very well-known story, but I will just repeat it because it helps us understand this a bit further. So he was guided in his vision into a seaside, and there was two set of footprints, and he thought that when there are two sets of footprints, Christ was walking next to him, and when it was just one set of them, Christ left him alone and he suffered. And the angel told him that's not the case. Where there are two set of footprints, he was walking next to you, but where there is one set, he was carrying you on his back. So we need to remember that when there is nothing we can do, God does everything else. Otherwise we would have been all dead by now. But it's not our time yet. So we will go through tribulation, but we need to remember that Christ is carrying us. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, that's a very good story, but it is in that fact that sometimes we can do everything humanly possible, and then there's a point where we go, you know what, I can't actually do that. And rather than stress and worry, it's leaving it in God's hands, going, okay, if I'm called just to sit and just be, then let my focus be on you and not the problem. Because when we start to do that, the worries start to come on top of us and we start to get weighed down by that.
Yes. Anything else?
I was going to say as well, like when we're talking about prayer, sometimes when our brain is at that point where we're so stressed that we can't think to pray, sometimes either you can find recordings or you can record yourself with certain prayers. And so when you're feeling quite overwhelmed, you can even play that back in the car or whatever it may be. And so even though you're praying, even though it's yourself that's praying, you're praying with yourself out loud.
These are different techniques depending on the character of the person.
Correct.
But they can be helpful.
Yeah, depending on the person and what suits. And there's, just because it helps with one person doesn't mean it's going to help with the next. And that's okay. It's just finding certain things that get you to where you need to.
But I'm telling you, when we find ourselves in a dead end, if you were to forget about the waves, that they're suffocating us, forget about the storm, forget about the tornado, whatever it could be, cyclone, and just have a conversation with God. This is what happened to me. I told you this last year. I nearly died 3 times, like literally. And the second time, it was just escaping from the first time of nearly dying, which was my burst appendix. And I was outside of the theater, and I had an allergic reaction to something that I never knew I was allergic to. And the this word. So she went in, and I was by myself, and my breath nearly stopped. And that's when I said to God, my Lord, if you want to take me, take me. I didn't even think if I'm righteous or not, if I will be saved or not. I said to God, if you want to take me, take me. But what is going to happen to my spiritual children? As soon as I said that, everything was reversed, and I started breathing properly. This gave me the experience of how we're all in God's hands, and anything can happen at any time. But it also proved to me the reason why I'm still alive. Like I should have died 3 times last year, and I didn't. So the reason why I'm alive, it's not because of my looks. It's because of God's will. And it's not for myself. It's for my kids. As crazy as this sounds. And this is one of the reasons why I can't be afraid of anything. When my time comes, it will be very obvious. But it's not yet. Anyone, anything?
Changing the topic. It's been the last couple of weeks, talking about something I didn't quite understand, about how there's a Holy Trinity, and then that's somehow replicated in us with nous and
reasoning and spirit.
And spirit. Can you talk maybe a bit more about that? And I think you can sort of explain the difference between nous and those things, but if you could maybe clarify a little bit.
This is something that I think St. Gregory Palamas talks about, nous, logos, pneuma. So we are created in the image and likeness of the Holy Trinity, not in the image and likeness of Christ. In the image and likeness of the Holy Trinity, which means that like the Holy Trinity is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, inside us we have, in our existence, we have our nous, our reasoning, and our spirit. Our nous is like the governor of our existence, like they say theologically and not practically. This is a theological term, and please do not understand it in an everyday way. I will tell you what I mean. They say that the Father in the Holy Trinity is the reason of the Holy Trinity. It doesn't mean that there was ever a time that the Son and the Holy Spirit didn't exist. But theologically, we say that the Father is the first among equals. So in the image and likeness of the Holy Trinity, we have our nous, our reasoning, and our spirit. Our nous is, and I said this a few days ago, there was a translation, and they used the word mind instead of nous. And I said to a few people that they were there, you can't compare the mind with the nous, especially when you talk about understanding God and experiencing God. So nous, I don't know if you understand it in English. In Greek is nous. So nous is what can see God. It's not our eyes. Nous is what can experience God, can understand God. And our mind has to do with our brain. So it's something more or less material, although we can't see it. You can't see your mind. I mean, if you plug yourself, you can see the waves, but you can't see your mind. The thing is that nous and mind are two different things. And then the reasoning, like the Son, is the logos of our existence, is the thinking process, is the understanding process, is everything which has to do with our reasoning. And then our spirit is our spirit. They're very difficult. They're not things you can easily talk about. And what I tried to do was not to explain anything. I was just repeating what St. Gregory said, and that was it. Does it make any more sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's another question from that same talk. You talked about 333 people and 999. What's the difference between 333 and 999?
So that this will be in the book that, God willing, will come out at some point. We said that we're in the image and likeness of the Holy Trinity. That's how we were created. So, talking about the 666 in the Revelation, this is what is related to. And we said that the image of God in us is like a 333. It's like we have, the 333 is a number with 3 digits. The same way we are one, our existence is one, but as we said, we're in the image and likeness, in the image of the Holy Trinity, which means that we have our nous, our reasoning, and our spirit. This is what the 333 represents. Now, if we were to give this to God, if you were to multiply it by 3, you make it a 999. The number 9, it looks like a human person standing up. So our nous, our reasoning, and our spirit, 999, they look like three little humans looking up. That's how we should be. This is what Nepsis makes us do. But if we were to use, and this is what it looks like when from the image of God we become the likeness of God. So the image of God, let's say that it's represented from the 333, and the likeness of God of the 999. But if we were to use just our own strength, then we can only multiply it by 2, and this makes us a 666. 333 by 2 is 666. And as we said, the number 6 is like a human upside down, looking backwards. And this is what the devil wants us to do, which is the opposite of Nepsis. And when we talk about 999, the little man, the 3 numbers, the 3 digits, they have their feet on the ground and their head where it should be up high looking forward. But when we talk about the 666, they have their feet on the clouds, thinking they're somebody, and then their head is downwards and backwards, because that's what the devil makes us focus on. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
That's the story behind that. It's just a symbolic thing. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Any questions from Nepsis so far? We have some questions here. We have a lot of questions here. All right. How can I, as a mom asks this question, learn to stop worrying about the many influences that are out there? I pray, but I see my children have changed since going to school. For example, my daughter wanted to wear lipstick from the 2nd week in kindy. Any ideas? That's a subject, I think. Any ideas? What parents can do? I mean, they learn not to worry, but they can't just not worry. How can I as mom learn to stop worrying about the many influences that are out there? I pray, but I see my children have changed since going to school. For example, my daughter wanted to wear lipstick from the second week in kindy. Any thoughts?
It's true. It's true. My niece and my goddaughter's daughter, and it's true. Like I'm a grandmother, but I'm also like a grand aunt, whatever you want to call it. But all of them are in kindy, and they all wanted to put lipstick on, makeup, do your face. Especially this morning, I went to my goddaughter's, had to babysit her daughter, and who is how old is she now? 4, and she wanted to give me a facial, and she did. And I've got pictures on my phone of her doing her yaya, my big sister's makeup. They do. But then there's so much out there these days, isn't it? It's sort of like, that's all they see on
Makeup
TV.
is the least of our problems.
That's about right. Because even I did, when I was a little kid, we were too poor. And so I used to make my lipstick with my mother's Ulan night cream first, and then her face powder, pat it on. So I had a really nice peach-coloured lipstick, which was fashionable 60-something years ago. So, you know, like, it is part in one way until the little boy says, I like pink and I want to put some lipstick on. That was this morning. Jonathan did that. He's only 3. But it's a reality. It's a very true reality. It's something I think that girls will go through, without a doubt. But I think you also have to think of all the rubbish that's out there that children, they're exposed to it. Whether it's the sorts of things that they watch on TV for children, all that sort of stuff, it's out there. So what do we do?
What do we do? We send in a question.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments, any thoughts? From a mother of young children. Femi, just behind you.
This is a good question because I would like some of the answer as well. But from the things that I've been told, if you can try and not make your child's world like their own, like they're the most important thing in the world. That if they understand that they're not the center of the world, and also like focus on the right things. So instead of saying, "Oh, how pretty you are," and other stuff, saying how kind you are and how, or that sort of thing. Like focusing on the right thing yourself with the kids. I mean, everyone's got freedom, so they're going to grow up at some stage and they're going to want to explore what they want to explore anyway. And if you've given them the right foundation and then you've given them access to or a relationship or opportunity for a relationship with a spiritual father as well, then when they hate you and they don't want to listen to you, maybe they'll listen to them. And apart from that, tell me more, please.
It's a whole bunch of things that we could do. First of all, don't despair, all right? don't despair. The thing is, it's not easy. So we have to pray for our kids. We have, as a family, give them an example of love in the house. This is the most important thing. I keep repeating it every time I can. If the kids, they don't experience love between the parents in the house, nothing else works. This is extremely important. And also, the fathers of the church, they were comparing the ascetics, let's say, when St. Anthony was alive, with ascetics that they would come centuries after. And they were saying that people of our times, and even of later times, they will do way less, but for them it will be considered as if they did more than the great ascetics of the desert when St. Anthony was alive. Why? Because, for example, if at St. Anthony's times there was internet, it would have been a different story. It wouldn't have been so easy for them. So what I'm saying is that God will judge us according to the struggles of our times. So even if ourselves or our kids, we achieve less, it will be considered as an achievement, because it is an achievement. Internet has gone, I will tell you this, throughout the whole of monastic world. There is internet in every single monastery. This is a big distraction for monks. They can be in the desert and have internet access, which means it's not a desert. They live in the middle of a city. It's not a desert. So the same difficulty comes in the family when you have a young kid and goes to school, and the influences there, are so many, so different and so big, and you can't just tell them everybody is wrong. You can't. Because they will tell you, Mom, you're wrong. You are boring, you're old-fashioned, and it might end up even being, Mom, I hate you, at some point, when they're teenagers, right? We heard all this in confessions, in so many different cases. That's why we start when they are young. We start with our example. We start with love. And we start, as you said, with training them how to have a spiritual father, how to believe, how to pray. There are families that the young kids, they all have a small prayer rule, even if it is few Jesus prayers while falling asleep. They will remember this for the rest of their lives. This is the foundation. And when they have difficulties at school, they might even practice a Jesus prayer, and it does make a difference. But if you were to tell them all of a sudden, you're not allowed to go to the 4 days trip that your schoolmates go to, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And in Greece it's even worse, because when kids go to the universities, usually the universities, they are far away from the place the kids were born. When here, you drive half an hour and you're in the uni. So the kids, they still stay, they live with their parents. And that's not the case over there. And it's more difficult. So God help us all. It's not easy, but if you do everything else right, and if you talk to your kids, and if you have a communication with them, you can explain to them why some things are not for them yet, and some things are not for them at all, and some things they won't benefit them at all. But at the end of the day, once they are teenagers, once they are 17, 18, that's when it shows what you've done when they were little. It's not the time to burn your bridges with them. It's not going to help. Very difficult, very challenging, very sad. It's the reality of our times. That's what it is. Thank you.
So is that then the time that you kind of just, life is long, they'll encounter difficulties one day and come back to where they found love?
That's if you gave them the right foundation. This is what happened in the parable of the prodigal son. He had the right foundation, he went away, he destroyed himself, but he came straight back to his father. Because he knew this was the only way out. The only issue today is that there are drugs, that they play with our brain, and it's very scary. And you know these things as a pharmacist, what they can do to your brain. Yeah, they can cook you. Yes.
I think for parents who are struggling to live a Christian life, when the child gets to an age where they're starting to flex their own muscles and show an independent path, our tendency, I think, is to push harder in the opposite direction And I know you've spoken to me about this, and sometimes that's not the right thing to do.
No.
So thank you for that, and would you elaborate on it, please, Grace?
Yes. So we need to have a relationship with our kids. And a relationship doesn't mean that I will tell you what's right, because that's not a relationship. A relationship means that, look, son, let me know how you think about this matter, but that's what my experience taught me in life, and just keep it in mind. Believe it or not, kids have conscience. So if we don't push them, they won't push back. But if we tell them kindly and let them just plant the seed, if there is good soil in their soul, it will grow. And that's what Christ does with us. And that's why Christ says, whoever wants, follow me. He doesn't put the knife on our neck saying, you either come with me or I will kill you. He could do that. He created us out of nothing. He could do that. But he doesn't do that because this is not an indication of love. And we need to understand that this is a very interesting concept. God did not create us for himself. God created us for ourselves. Which means, what I give to you guys, I don't give it to you so that you're attached to me. This is a failure. I give it to you so within yourselves, the Holy Spirit grows. And that's your benefit, not mine. So whatever we do with our kids, we do it for them. We don't want them to be like us. We want them to be who God wants them to be. And every single kid is individual, and every single kid is unique. And it's not the same recipe for everyone. That's why if the parents have a relationship with God, this is what will teach them what to do with their kids. There is no logic in these things. There is no logic in spirituality. But it is what it is. There was a father, he had like 2 sons. I think he was a priest. They were teenagers and he couldn't control them, so he didn't know what to do. So what he ended up doing, because he didn't want to push them away, further away, every night when they were going to bed, he would kneel in front of the icon of Panagia and pray for them for half an hour. Within few months, the kids were different. Otherwise, and when they make a mistake, we can't tell them, I told you so. Because this is like putting a knife in their hearts. They know they're wrong. They know it. Like, we can't dishearten them even more. Because if they have low self-esteem as well, it's like destroying them. You can't tell them, I told you so. That's not what the prodigal son's father did. He got out there on the streets, he embraced him, he kissed him, he gave him the ring, he gave him the best clothes, and he killed the fatted calf. That's not what we do. As if nothing happened, as if the prodigal son was the king of the universe. To make them feel comfortable when they made a mistake. And that's the kindness of the Holy Spirit. Because believe it or not, in our lives, we also make mistakes, and we wouldn't like our kids to judge us for what we've done wrong. It will be very harsh. The thing is, I will say this, and if we don't have any other questions, we might need to stop. An hour has passed. We judge others because we don't know God. I don't know if this makes any sense to you. We judge others because we do not know God. If we knew God, we would have understood who we are. And once I understand who I am, and I'm not embarrassed of who I am, and I understand who God is and what God has created out of my terrible self, I can't judge anyone. Even people who might be persecuting me. I know where they're wrong, but I can't judge them. Everything, our whole existence, κρέμεται από μία τρίχα. How do we say this in English?
From one hair.
Everything is hanging from one hair. Yes, so we can't judge others. But we can embrace them and accept them as they are. And if we can't live with them, we just move away. Politely, and that's it. Any other questions? All right. I'm leaving this Sunday for overseas, and I'll be back around St. Nicholas, beginning of December. So I don't think there will be anything for this year. If there is, we will advertise it, and we'll see how we go after that. All right, thanks everyone for coming.